Hello, everyone. I think we just opened the lines. I appreciate you joining us today for this third quarterly update for the South Atlantic Coastal Study project. My name is Jenny Bywater. I'm going to be just on the line helping facilitate today. Please reach out to myself or Lindsay Wilson. We're your organizers on the call today if you are having any technical issues. I'd like to point out a few things. You should have handouts available of the slides today. We'll also be posting the slides to the SACS webpage following today's session. And please you should have kind of a chat and question box also available to you in your control panel. So as we go through today, feel free to submit comments and questions there, and we'll have those and can bring them up to our panelists at various points. But with that, I would like to hand it over to Pam Kasten, the project manager for the SACS project.
All right, thank you very much, Jenny. I appreciate that. Again, hello and welcome, everyone. As Jenny indicated, I'm Pam Kasten, the regional project manager for the South Atlantic Coastal Study team. So we really thank you for your time and your interest in the study today, and we welcome you to our third quarterly webinar for calendar year 2020. Next slide, please. So the purpose of these webinars is to keep you, our partners, and our stakeholders across the region updated on the progress of study program elements and outputs since we last spoke with you in June. Now we're going to walk through an overview of where we are on our regional study products, give our district project managers an opportunity to present to you their activities and accomplishments over the last few months, and then open the floor to interactive Q&A via the chat function of this webinar. Next slide, please. So we're maintaining a fairly consistent agenda for these quarterly updates. So the flow of this presentation is really going to be similar to that which most of you have likely seen before. We're going to move through a quick team roll call, briefly touch on the South Atlantic Coastal Study shared vision statement, and then provide you with a snapshot of the overall program schedule so you can get a feel for where we are as we move toward posting of our draft report. We're then going to provide you with an update on a few of our regional products to date before moving into the state and territory specific update on activities associated with the state and territory appendices and the focus area action strategies that are going to be part of those documents. So we'll then wrap up the briefing with a quick review of what's up next before opening the floor to Q&A. Next slide, please. So in the interest of time, I'd like to just review for you all the folks on our command center team, as well as our district project managers. Their contact information for all of these folks can be found on the last slide of this presentation, and please reach out to any or all of us as needed at any time following this webinar. So again, I'm regional project manager for the South Atlantic Coastal Study, working out of the Corps' Wilmington district. Lisa Clark is our outreach lead. She is working out of our Jacksonville district. Adrice Dobbs is our economics lead out of Jacksonville district, Florida. Trevor Lancaster is our geospatial lead, working out of Wilmington district. Dr. Drew Condon is our engineering technical lead, working out of Jacksonville district. Christina May is our environmental discipline team lead. She's supporting us out of the Corps' Baltimore district. Dr. Clay McCoy is our regional sediment management lead and the acting director of the Regional Sediment Management Center of Expertise. Dr. McCoy is working out of Jacksonville district as well. And then, of course, relative to the command center team, last but not least, is Mr. Matt Schrader, who is our planning lead working out of Jacksonville. Now, our district project managers, we have Ms. Lisa Bishop, who is interim project manager for the Wilmington district. Many of you have undoubtedly worked with Brennan Dooley. Brennan is on extended family leave at this time, and Lisa is stepping in to assist the Wilmington team continue with the great forward progress on the North Carolina State Appendix. So we're very appreciative to Lisa. Welcome, Lisa. Diane Perkins, who is our project manager with Charleston District, April Patterson with Savannah District, Ashley Fountain with Jacksonville District, and Meredith Ledart with Mobile District. Next slide, please. So again, on behalf of myself and the South Atlantic Coastal Study team, we really want to thank you all for joining us today. Right now, we'd like to take a poll. You should see a poll kind of popping up on your webinar. I would like to take a quick minute to ask you to annotate this poll with your affiliation. This really will assist us in continuing to develop our outreach program and really better tailor these up.
So presentation on the day.
Thank you, Jay, very much. So it looks like we've got
we have a
presentation pretty much across the board. We appreciate the attendees from our tribal nations, absolutely. But we've got a great mix also of federal, state, NGO folks, and folks that are identifying as others. So again, thank you very much. We appreciate your time and your attendance today, and we look forward to providing you with a great update. So let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is really just a quick overview for you of where we are in the overall study progress. We're moving smartly through our program, targeting publication of the draft report products in October of next year. That's October of 2021. The tan line represents where we are in our overall 4-year study timeline. Essentially, we're just past the halfway mark. So I think the takeaway here really is that we've got quite a few technical analyses that are still concurrently underway. So it's been a really busy time, really busy year essentially for our study team. And as we move into and through the next calendar year, we'll be transitioning into report compilation and analytical refinements of all the information that we've aggregated and generated to date. And we'll also be working on translating some of those products into geospatial web applications. So there will be continued opportunities after production of the draft report for you all to work with our study team as we together move forward in taking the report ultimately from a draft to a final product. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to read through the South Atlantic Coastal Studies shared vision statement here word for word, but I've included it really as a reminder that this collaboratively developed vision is the primary metric against which we're gauging our study success in the draft and ultimately the final report. So as you all listen to our team update you on the regional and district activities that have occurred this past quarter, please keep this statement generally in mind regarding our focus and our end goals. Next slide, please. So most of you are probably familiar with our Key Products Placemat. If you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to really take a few moments later on to read through it and let us know if you've got any questions. Highlighted in red are the specific products that our team will hit on in their updates for this quarter in a few minutes. Again, we've talked in earlier webinars about all of these other products. So we're going to highlight these today. If you've got any questions on any of the other products, please let us know. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to Lisa Clark, our outreach lead, for an update on our overall outreach program activities. Lisa?
Thank you, Pam. Okay, good afternoon. Oh, waiting for the next slide, sorry. All right, let me just get my camera on here. All right, good afternoon. I'm Lisa Clark, as Pam said. I'm out of the Jacksonville district, and I'm the outreach lead for the South Atlantic Coastal Study. The pie chart on the top left is a breakdown of the more than 1,300 plus stakeholders we have throughout the study area. We really want to say thank you and tell you how much we appreciate you, our stakeholders, who take the time to attend our webinars and participate in the workshop. Looking at the top right, you'll see a picture of our monthly newsletter. These are distributed bi-monthly now, and they provide information on what the command and district teams have been working on and other study product updates. You will find past issues on our website and can always email sacs@usace.army.mil for a copy today. And maybe if we could drop that in the chat just so that they have that in case they don't. And then moving to the bottom left, during our last quarterly webinar, I reported that our district teams had just finished their kickoff webinars. Well, they didn't stop there. The teams have been very busy with their focus area action strategy workshops, environmental and cultural webinars. And the first wrap-up workshop took place this morning with the Jacksonville district team and the Northeast Florida stakeholders. Ashley and her team kicked that off this morning. You'll learn more about the full schedule of these wrap-up sessions and more about what we're finding in those workshops from our planning lead, Matt Schrader, and the district project managers a little later on in the presentation. And finally, on the bottom right is our website. We invite you to visit our website at www.sad.usace.army.mil/sacs for past newsletters and other study information. With that, I will hand it over to Dr. Drew Condon, our engineering technical lead. Thank you.
Oh, Drew, we can't hear you if you're talking. I think you might need to unmute.
That's my fault. You think I would have hit it up by now. Sorry about that. Thanks, Lisa, and good afternoon to everyone. I'm going to provide you with an update on the coastal hazard system, or the CHS as we call it, along with a few example applications. So presented on the slide here is the overall timeline for the CHS workflow. As a reminder, the coastal hazard system is a coastal storm hazard data storage and mining system. So it stores high fidelity numerical modeling responses such as water level and current, wave heights, wave periods, wave direction, those parameters in a database online that can be mined and used for a variety of applications. So due to the size of the study area for SACS, 3 study basins were developed: a Caribbean basin focusing on Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, a Southeast Atlantic basin, and a Gulf of Mexico basin. Work on the Puerto Rico and the Virgin Island basin is largely completed absent of the hosting of the data to the website, which should occur in late winter to early spring of 2021. With the Southeast Atlantic basin, the 2 storm model runs have been completed. The storm responses are currently being combined with the probabilistic descriptions in the joint probability analysis, and that analysis should be wrapped up in the coming week or 2 towards the end of this month. The 2 storm model runs for the Gulf of Mexico are nearly complete. Once those are wrapped up, the joint probability analysis will begin, and that should be completed by the end of the year. Following that, the data will begin to be updated to the CHS web tool. The annual exceedance probability data for all the save points, along with the time series of storm responses for each of the synthetic storm events, and the storm characteristics will be populated online and available for public consumption. And that should all be completed for all basins by about summer of next year. You see on the slide also two stars that represent some applications of this data on some of our ongoing feasibility studies in the Jacksonville district. In both of these studies, the CHS data has already been leveraged. And if we go to the next slide, I'll show a few applications of that data. Okay, so what you see here are in the top left are some of the draft JPA results for Puerto Rico and the USVI. So just to quickly walk through some of this, the top frame shows the amplification in storm surge heights due to sea level rise. This is for our USACE high sea level rise estimate, 100-year estimate, so about 7 feet of sea level rise. And what the plot essentially shows is the locations where the effects of sea level rise will lead to amplification of surge above and beyond what we would expect by just linearly adding a sea level rise amount. Sometimes we see these bathtub models that just kind of add a sea level rise amount, but there are some nonlinear effects that occur that lead to an increase in surge above and beyond what we would expect by doing it that way. So we can see this is largely along the north coast of Puerto Rico, primarily in the wetlands and back bays around San Juan and Arecibo areas. Below that plot, we see a similar type analysis for wave height between the scenarios examined. So again, this is for that high sea level rise scenario. And the plots show that wave heights will increase in excess of about a meter island wide. This is the 100-year wave height for both Puerto Rico and USVI, and this is pretty uniform across the basin. So with the deeper sea level associated with sea level rise, we see this almost uniform increase in wave height. So just below that is another type analysis that can be easily derived with the CHS data. NOAA publishes flood and threshold values for discrete locations based on empirically derived formulas for water level observations. These current day thresholds are depicted in the plot here for Charlotte, Amalie, and St. Thomas, along with the CHS annual exceedance probabilities for present day and two different sea level change scenarios. And you can see that under current conditions, the 50-year event only meets the minor flooding threshold defined by NOAA. However, in the future, under both scenarios, major flooding would be expected for such an event. And on the previous slide, I hinted at the use of the CHS data in ongoing studies here in the Jacksonville district. On the right side is one example, and this is an application in the coastal Puerto Rico feasibility study. Data from CHS State Point off the coast of Rincon on the northwest coast of Puerto Rico was mined, and a representative storm suite of about 25 storms was developed. You see that in kind of the middle plot there. The distribution of water levels and wave heights are shown in the bottom figure, and using this data, the time series of data for each of these storms was used in a cross-shore change model, seashore model, and the results are being incorporated into the Corps beach effects model build for this location. Similarly, for the San Juan Metro study, a subsample of storm events were used to drive a smaller scale, a finer resolution project scale AdSurf model, which then fed results into our G2 CRM model for that study. So really, I just wanted to highlight some of the possible uses for some of the CHS data. There's many more that go beyond this, but these are just a few of the examples and some of the ways we're already using the data that's currently available. With that, I'll hand it off to Dr. McCoy.
We did have one just quick question come in on if the CHS data and models are publicly available.
So the data will be publicly available. It actually, if you back up one slide, or you don't even need to, I can just touch on it. So the CHS web tool is the website where the data is posted. As of now, that is just populated with data from the Northeast and the Texas coast and the Great Lakes, actually. But starting in 2021, next year, the data from this study will start to become available on that site.
Great.
So Drew and Jenny, this is Pam. So I think the intent right now is that Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands, we're looking to have that information made publicly available in and around the February to March timeframe of next year. It'll probably be early summer or thereabouts when South Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico will be available to everybody. But we're working that hard.
That's correct. Yep.
And thanks for that clarification. Let's move on to Clay for an update on the sand availability and needs determination.
All right. Thank you. I'm Clay McCoy, the Acting Director of the RSM Center of Expertise and the Project Manager for the SAND study. The sand availability and needs study quantified the sand needs and available sand resources for all beach nourishment projects, both federal and non-federal, in the region over the last 50 years. The sand study provides some very fundamental information needed for beachfront communities to manage and plan for their future in the face of sea level rise and increased impact from storms. The study was executed by subject matter experts from every district of the South Atlantic District Division and was supported by 12 state and local federal coastal management agencies. And our products include a final report that quantifies our sand needs and available resources across the division down to the project level, and a comprehensive geodatabase that provides general project information and sand resources information, as well as a document library of references to support that geodatabase. The report's an excellent reference for anyone that wants to know about any beach projects and available sand resources in the division. And it can support planning for beach projects as well as sand searches. And we hope that all our coastal stakeholders will use this report to support informed decision making. The report's currently available at the SACS website, and we're in the process of vetting the geodatabase for public release, and we should have that up on the website pretty soon. Okay, so the sand results at the county level are provided on this slide here. Red is bad and green is good. If you live in a county that is orange or red, that means that currently you do not have sufficient resources identified to support your county's 50-year needs. If you look at the figure, there's a lot of counties in that situation, and so they're going to run into some issues in the coming decades. And in some places, we're already feeling the pressure of limited sand resources. Next slide, please. Okay. For this slide and the next, I wanted to give you some examples of the type of information that's provided in the report. If you're like me and you love maps and tables, you're really going to love this report. We'll start with the maps. On the top right is a state-level map documenting all beach projects in the state of North Carolina and all available sand resources. The sand sources include RSM sources such as navigation channels and nearshore shoal complexes, upland dredge material management area sources, and offshore borrow sources that we categorize as proven in green, potential in yellow, and unverified plus in orange. The map on the left is a county-level map for New Hanover County, North Carolina, documenting both beach projects and sand sources. You can see that we've included labels for all features at the county level, and also included the available volumes from the offshore borrow area. Next slide, please. Okay, all right, so this slide shows the supporting data for the maps on the previous slide. The top table includes all data rolled up to the county level for the state of North Carolina, and it indicates that New Hanover County, the one we were just looking at, has a total 50-year need of 102 million cubic yards. They're accounting for that need with 41 million cubic yards from identified offshore sources, 38 million cubic yards from RSM sources, and they have a total deficit of 23 million cubic yards for an overall sand balance of 78% of their 50-year needs. And if you take a look at the big table, we have all the beach projects 50-year needs, the volume by the borrow area type, as well as RSM and the ZMMA sources I was talking about. Next slide, please. So this should be my last slide. So the SAND team provided some recommendations and next steps to address the SAND needs challenges throughout the region. The first is to continue to build on the SACS approach of stakeholder engagement and consensus building. We should continue to engage the coastal management community and leverage the spotlight that SACS provides local to federal to present and implement some of our SAND solutions. We have two general actionable items that are complementary. The first is develop a prioritization of sand needs and strategies to address those needs. Two items under this action item are to keep the sand database updated and to focus on the Unverified Plus sites for areas that need sand. Unverified Plus sites are those that are hypothesized to contain sand resources based on very minimal data, and they will require additional data to confirm the quality and quantity of the sand in those areas. The second recommendation is to identify areas to increase efficiencies to maximize use of what we do have. So we put a 55% contingency on our sand needs to account for borrow area inefficiencies, dredging losses, and sea level rise. And we feel like we can make some progress on the borrow area efficiencies and the dredging losses components for sure. We also feel that increased use of regulatory flexibility, such as beneficial use and nearshore placement regulations in Florida, can provide an opportunity to fill some of those sediment needs gaps. So with that, I believe I'll pass it off to Trevor Lancaster. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. McCoy. Good afternoon. I'm Trevor Lancaster, the geospatial lead out of the Wilmington district for the SACS. I'm going to provide a brief update on the various geospatial products and data sets that are currently being utilized and ones that are actively in development and being planned. We've completed several web mapping applications that have supported both the internal Corps of Engineers district project delivery teams, as well as the focus area action strategy development sessions. As we briefed previously, the Tier 1 risk assessment viewer has been used extensively and is publicly available at the URL here. Additionally, since the last quarterly webinar, we've completed the Tier 2 economic risk assessment dashboard. This depicts expected annual damages to the census block level for existing and future sea level rise conditions. These outputs are derived by FEMA's HAZUS multi-hazard tool, running a level 1 HAZUS scenario, inundation scenario, coastal inundation. And this dashboard provides an interactive application for users to identify specific areas and identify the dollar damages by 10, 50, 100, and 500-year events for both scenarios. The URL is on the screen. It's also provided in the handout PDF as well. We've been supporting the environmental sub-team that Christina May will discuss here briefly next, with identifying potential resources at risk to coastal inundation using both NOAA's CCAP data and our Tier 1 hazard scenarios. This URL is here to the various dashboards and data sets that we use for that. And lastly, as many of you on the call, we've been supporting the focus area workshops with some web mapping applications that have been pretty successful given our virtual environment and soliciting feedback from stakeholders and things like that. In progress, we're working on some visualization tools for Dr. McCoy's SAND products and geodatabase, as well as some state and territory appendices web applications that will complement the report products as those come online. Lastly, into this next year, we're planning to support the CHS with some visualization tools for looking at some of the depth grids and outputs from the CHS data, as well as supporting the measures and cost library. Next slide, please. As these data become available and finalized and reviewed, we are looking to make these available for public download. Right now, our first two are going to be the Tier 1 risk assessment and the SAND availability and needs determination. We're kind of tightening up, dotting our I's and crossing our T's. And in the next month, we're looking to, in November timeframe, put these out for initial release for download with appropriate metadata, reports, layer files, things like that. Similarly, for the Tier 2 economic risk assessment, these will be a geodatabase format to the census block level, as well as for the environmental risk resources inundation risk. These will also be by state and territory. And then lastly, as we kind of tidy up some of the study products, we'll be putting out some of our planning reaches, focus areas, lots of summaries to the state and county levels, and lastly, some high-risk places and priority environmental areas as identified by the district PDTs. And with that, concludes my brief, and I will pass it off to Ms. Christina May.
Thank you, Trevor. My name is Christina May, and I'm the environmental lead on the South Atlantic Coastal Study, and I work out of the Baltimore district. So the environmental resources risk analysis and the web mapping application were presented to federal and state resource agencies and non-governmental organizations on July 28th. And based on stakeholder feedback received during and following that webinar, the following updates were made or are in the process of being made to our analysis and the web map. So the first update, the vulnerability scores for the natural areas in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia were updated, which resulted in updates to these vulnerability and risk inundation maps for these states. These updates have been made in the web app, and the updated vulnerability tables are also included under the methodology tab in the web app. And the link to the web app is shown on the bottom of this slide if you're interested in looking at those updates. The second update is the percentage of low, moderate, and high inundation risk per county will be added to the web app, and that will be done by the end of October. Another update is the CCAP layer will be clipped to the SAC study boundary. And lastly, we did receive notable feedback from our stakeholders on what to include or to make sure that we explain better in the documentation of our methodology to identify the at-risk environmental resources. The team will consider all of this feedback as we draft our methodology, and the methodology will be included in the SAC's environmental report. Next slide, please. So a webinar was held on September 30th for our environmental stakeholders, where the environmental team presented the priority environmental areas by state and territory and the criteria used to identify those areas. And based on stakeholder feedback during the webinar, priority areas have been added, including the Boca Ciega Bay and Pinellas County Aquatic Preserves in Florida, as well as the Great Pond in St. Croix. And we are considering adding other areas to those priority environmental areas as stakeholders provide us feedback. So the environmental team has identified 153 priority environmental areas so far. And the priority environmental area tables have been sent out to our stakeholders. Those tables include a description of all of the priority areas and why they were selected as priority areas. And based on that stakeholder feedback, we will be adding or removing priority areas. So it was interesting. A question was brought up during this webinar asking about the difference between, the planning reaches, focus areas, and priority environmental areas. So this prompted our team to make sure that we clearly define and illustrate the difference between these areas, both in our main report and on our SACS website. So we will be updating our SACS website to include the definitions and kind of an illustration of these different areas. So now I'm going to pass it on to Matt Schrader.
Thanks, Christina. Next slide, please. So many of you are aware of the focus area action strategy work that's currently underway. And so I'm just going to give a brief overview of these efforts, and then right after me, district PMs are going to provide more detail on focus areas in their districts. For those of you who aren't aware of the focus area efforts, this slide provides a little bit of background. There's 21 focus areas throughout the SAC study area. They're shown on the screen here. And there's at least 2 per state and territory. First and foremost, the goal is to combine ongoing and needed actions by all stakeholders into strategies that leverage SACS products, but also multitude of other stakeholder resources that are out there in order to address risk. So the strategies will serve as examples of how stakeholders can address risk. So in that context, it's important that we have a diversity of areas where population, infrastructure, environmental or cultural resources are at risk, or a combination of those types of resources that are at risk. It's also important that we have a variety of geographic settings, meaning open coast, back bay, and by back bay generally we mean the landward side of barrier islands, estuarine, tidally influenced riverine areas, And all of these different areas are represented within the 21 focus areas. So the goals of the focus area action strategies, they're going to vary depending on the past and ongoing efforts that are taking place outside of SACS, right? What are stakeholders, what are the territories and states doing, NGOs, all the different stakeholders in an area. That's going to determine the overall goals of the focus areas, as well as significant stakeholder input. Next slide, please. Regarding that input, sorry, I'm trying to get my notes going here. Regarding that input and getting it in a workshop environment over the past couple of months, district teams and CDM Smith, they've really done a phenomenal job adapting the focus area workshops to a virtual format due to COVID impacts. Originally, it was going to be in-person, day-long format. So what we did was to break these into 3 virtual workshops. The 3 different workshops and kind of what they covered are shown on the screen. These were held, 3 different workshops were held for each focus area. And these were aided by virtual polls, breakouts, other tools. Trevor hit on one of these earlier, the use of real-time GIS markup and annotation so that we could document stakeholder input on ongoing and needed actions. That was really vital. But stakeholder involvement is really the key to success here. And in order to make this virtual format work, we really needed and continue to need stakeholders to commit to attending all 3 of the workshops. And we've generally had really great participation. So thank you all for that, because that's the real key. Districts have held the first 2 workshops in the series. First 2, again, shown here on the slide. The third, the wrap-up session, will be still to be held to update stakeholders on progress and next steps. As Lisa mentioned, Jacksonville District had held the first wrap-up this morning for Northeast Florida. Next slide, please. So this next slide will show the current dates for each focus area's wrap-up workshop. Again, district PMs are going to provide some additional detail in their updates. And with that, I will hand it off to Lisa Bishop from Wilmington District.
Thanks, Matt. Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Bishop, the interim project manager for the Wilmington District. And the next slide, please. So since our last call, the environmental team has identified 14 priority environmental areas within North Carolina. Almost all of these fall within one of our 3 designated focus areas. Since the August 4th cultural resources presentation, our environmental team has worked with the North Carolina Office of State Archaeology and the North Carolina State Historic Preservation Office to establish which cultural resources are priorities. And this resulted in over 50 historic properties within the SACS North Carolina footprint, and identified areas of extraordinary concern, including the inner banks of the Albemarle and Core Sound. This effort also identified 6 ongoing partnerships that are currently working toward cultural resource resiliency. Some of these include the Outer Banks Conservationists and the NPS Cape Hatteras group. And all of these efforts will be reflected in our strategy. Despite our best efforts at outreach to federal and state recognized tribes of North Carolina, we have yet to receive input or a willingness to participate in the SACS. So we don't have any updates there. The team has been diligently working through stakeholder feedback and initiating follow-up meetings to discuss particular strategies or ideas and allow our stakeholders to access the WebMap tool. We also designated the North Carolina Working Group, which is a collection of stakeholders from various agencies that we can meet with to discuss further development and how it may overlap both with each other and current agency projects. Follow-up meetings with stakeholders have been critical to establishing a more robust product. And through these partnerships, we have identified potential future projects that could increase resiliency. One of those is an enhanced building level risk assessment. The state of North Carolina has heavily invested in LIDAR data, which has provided a GIS layer of building footprints. And this could be used in conjunction with the CHS and provide a more targeted approach to mitigation, identify area clusters for other agencies such as NCORE for targeting future mitigation projects. And it could also refine and improve both cost-benefit analysis and structure buyouts. The state appendix and the action strategies are under development, and the team is focused on strategy development and also continued stakeholder follow-up and participation in addressing those efforts. Next slide, please. Some of the action strategy developments we're working on include marsh, dune, and beach restoration. This could have a multifold benefit of habitat protection and resiliency, and subsequent barrier island efficiency, resiliency, avoiding further damages inland and to the intercoastal waterway ecosystem. Several of the agencies we've talked to have brought this up, and so we're trying to incorporate all of their ideas in one. We have received additional information from stakeholders concerning the ongoing and historical thin layer placements, living shorelines, and marsh restoration projects, and we plan to include those in the strategy as well. A small scale version of the enhanced building level assessment could potentially be executed under the SACS. If approved, it would be included in the strategy, but would not be available until after the spring. And then the team has been working with the North Carolina Resiliency Plan, also a multi-agency partnership to include ongoing work within the strategy, and with the City of New Bern on their Flood Resiliency Plan, which is aimed at stormwater management in economically stressed areas. Follow-up meetings are ongoing, and we appreciate the feedback. It has been critical to creating a more robust product for our stakeholders. Next slide, please. So this is just an example from the Environmental Resources Project products. This is for Cape Hatteras National Seashore. Each priority environmental area will include a slide like this, and the reasons behind selection, as well as the vulnerabilities of these locations and the potential impacts that the area may experience. These type of products are being used in conjunction with the Tier 1 analyses and stakeholder feedback to assist us in strategy development. And finally, our focus area action strategy webinar 3 dates have been scheduled for the first week of December. And with that, I'll pass it on to Diane Perkins with the Charleston District.
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Diane Perkins, the project manager and lead planner for the Charleston District, and going to share with you a brief overview of what we've been doing over the past quarter. Next slide, please. Before I get into the overview, I do want to do just, as Christina May mentioned earlier, some folks sometimes are would be appreciative of some definitions of what we mean when we say certain things. So I'm just going to give a couple of definitions right now and let you know that South Carolina has 2 planning reaches. These are shown in the purple outline, and each of those has a focus area, and those are shown in the black outline. Additional things that are not shown on this particular map, and this is my interpretation of at least what I mean when I'm using these words. High-risk areas, a part of our work for our Tier 2 analyses, and Tier 2 analyses being when we're looking at risk at a state level, we're identifying high-risk areas. And high-risk areas can be anywhere across the 2 planning reaches, whether they're inside or outside of a focus area, doesn't matter. We're identifying high-risk areas. And environmental priority areas, in my mind, these are a subset of high-risk areas. They are out of the full range of environmental high-risk areas, they are ones that have been identified as priorities. Next slide, please. Okay, so if you look on the right-hand side, you will see what our 12 environmental priority areas are for South Carolina. In the top image, you have Reach SCO3, and in the bottom image, you have REACH SC04. If you move the top image to the right and the bottom image to the left, you could, you might need to change the scale of the images a little bit, but you could join the lines and you'd see the whole South Carolina coast. 12 environmental priority areas. So moving back to the left-hand side of the slide, I want to point out that our key finding from our Tier 2 analysis is that we have 83 high-risk areas. And as mentioned, 12 have been identified as high-priority environmental areas, but our other 71 high-risk areas, these are based on, there are additional environmental high-risk areas besides those 12. And we also have high-risk areas identified based on population and infrastructure information, based on cultural resources information, based on erosion information. Just highlighting these 12 environmental priority areas because these are one of the recent outcomes out of the full range of robust work that the South Carolina team is doing for our state analysis. So on the bottom there, you see we have ongoing analysis and drafting of the state appendix overall, the Tier 2 analysis, as well as of the focus area action strategies. And I want to take a moment to thank all of the stakeholders in the focus areas who joined us for the focus area action strategies. We are still very much in the midst of working with all of the great information and input and dialogue that we had not only in those meetings, but in meetings prior. Next slide, please. Okay, so for the focus area action strategies, I'm only going to talk about the main strategy development session. There was a kickoff session. It had its own attendance numbers. But for the main strategy development session, we had 18 attending for the Grand Strand focus area, and we had 24 attending for the Charleston metro area. Again, the small group discussions with those who stayed on the call through the end were extremely informative and helpful, and are very much shaping the work we are doing. Just one thing to mention that was applicable across both the Grand Strand and the Charleston metro focus areas is that Back Bay flooding is one key problem. Each of those focus areas had several key problems, but I just wanted to call out Back Bay flooding as one of the key problems that was shared by both of those. And Back Bay flooding, as well as many of the other problems that are occurring, are going to be significantly increased by sea level rise. Another key insight that we had through the focus area action strategy meeting and the conversations was that policies and programs are a key part of heading toward resilience, especially those at the local level, at city and county level government. Of course, there are many other insights and outcomes that will be discussed and presented as we continue our analyses and production of our reports. I just wanted to share a few key things today and let you know that we are having our focus area action strategy wrap-up workshops in early December, but those are not the last or only times to be interacting with the Charleston District, South Carolina team. Of course, there are these quarterly webinars. There will be more of those in the future. And also, the command team is working on putting together a military workshop, which may be happening in December. I think that that's all still being worked out. But for the SAC study, we are definitely not done engaging with stakeholders and having dialogue about the work we're doing. And of course, you're always welcome to email me if you're interested in particular in the work happening in South Carolina. And my email is diane.terkins@usace.army.mil. And that's my brief update for today. And I want to turn it over to the project manager for Savannah District, and that is April Patterson. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Pam. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm April Patterson, the project manager for the Savannah District. Sorry, I'm a little dark. Okay, that's better. My email address is at the bottom left if you need to reach me with any questions about this briefing. Next slide, please. Okay, so as you know, our risk assessment, and since we've met last, we've been identifying environmental resource areas that are either medium or high risk. And we've identified environmental priority environmental areas in Georgia. There are 3 in Georgia, 7 in Chatham County, our focus area, and then also 6 in Glenn County. Earlier this summer, we had our webinar 2 for the strategy development of our focus area action strategies. And thank you all for your participation in those meetings. They went extremely well. We used the GeoPortal to review the high-risk areas pertaining to infrastructure and identify problems and discuss measures to mitigate those risks. Some of the strategies that we addressed and the problems that we addressed included measures to reduce back bay flooding due to storm surge and sea level rise, particularly in the backside of barrier islands in Chatham County and in Chatham County. And then we also looked at measures to reduce and protect coastlines using regional sediment management of dredge material from Savannah Harbor and Brunswick Harbor O&M projects. We talked about recommendations for non-structural measures to prevent future risks, and a number of other strategies. And now we are refining those strategies, organizing them, identifying which ones may be able to be implemented in the near term, midterm, and long term, and what risks they address and how important they are based on an array of factors. All of those will go into our work on the draft Georgia appendix. We will be completing the draft Georgia appendix later this year. So looking forward, the next 3 to 6 months, we're planning our 3rd webinar for the focus area action strategies called our work wrap-up meeting for early to mid-November. And we'll be revisiting those strategy lists, the priorities, and refining them for inclusion in that draft report, the draft Georgia appendix. We're also doing other analyses for risks along the Georgia coast. We have a little bit more time to look a little bit more in depth at area strategies that we did not include in the Georgia and Chatham County focus area action strategy development workshops. So we want to look a little more in depth in other places along the Georgia coast and make sure we've captured all of those that are important to us as a community. So that's new, and look forward to setting up a meeting to talk with you all about that. So we have more engagements coming up. We have the focus area action strategies wrap-up meetings for both Chatham County. Chatham includes Savannah and Tybee Island. And we have another one for Glenn County, which includes Brunswick, St. Simons Island, and Jekyll Island. And we will also have a workshop for our military installations to see what tools SACS can provide to our military installations in Georgia, and maybe they have tools or information that we could use as part of the SACS report or recommendations that we could employ. And then, so after we've looked at all these focus area action strategies again, and we've developed new strategies and we've refined them, and we have them in the report, we'll have another chance to meet with all of you in a stakeholder workshop to review the draft appendix. And so we'll continue that engagement. So we look forward to meeting with you several times this year and continuing to work together. So with that, that concludes my briefing, and I'll pass it over to Ashley Fountain. Thank you.
Hey everyone, this is Kip Weber. I'm the lead planner of the Florida Appendix, and I'll be briefing for the Jacksonville District today. The slide provides some findings to date resulting from the Tier 1 and the Tier 2 analysis. First, there is significant risk, and there will be significant need for follow-on actions and studies by the Corps and other stakeholders. The Tier 1 and Tier 2 analysis resulted in over 500 high-risk locations throughout the Jacksonville District, which includes Florida and the territories of Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The highest risk occurs in Southeast Florida, and there are several other hotspots across the state of Florida and the territories. The risk footprint increases significantly with sea level rise, particularly in the low-lying and back bay tidally influenced areas. Many areas are already experiencing compound flooding or nuisance flooding, and an increased understanding is needed to address these problems. Additionally, the environmental team identified 31 priority environmental areas in Florida with over 120 sub-focus areas consisting of national wildlife refuges, state forests and parks, preserves, and more. Puerto Rico identified 25 priority environmental areas, and the U.S. Virgin Islands identified 13 priority environmental areas. In total, the Jacksonville District PDT has presented at 9 focus area kickoff workshops with a total of 290 attendees, and 9 focus area strategy development workshops with 248 attendees. Next slide, please. The team is currently working on gathering input from these workshops and will be presenting at the wrap-up workshops in the coming weeks. The slide shows the process the team is taking to complete the focus area action strategies. The picture in the background shows an example table that we have been compiling all the actions into. The team has grouped these actions based on common themes and have used these main themes to prioritize the technical analyses for each focus area. The goals of the technical analyses are to incrementally contribute to the shared vision for each focus area, to potentially give a head start for future follow-on efforts by either the Corps or other stakeholders, and to serve as examples for the utilization of SACS products and tools that are currently being developed. The strategy will combine the ongoing planned and needed actions from the table based on prioritization, timing, and sequencing to further advance the shared vision that we established during the kickoff workshops. There will be 7 workshops over the coming weeks, including 5 workshops for Peninsular Florida and a workshop for each of the territories. The tentative dates of these workshops are listed on the screen. We just completed the Northeast Florida focus area wrap-up workshop this morning and are prepping for the Southeast Florida wrap-up workshop next week. A few of the technical analyses are listed in the green polygon. These analyses include regional sediment management strategies for ecosystem restoration purposes, evaluation of impaired tributaries for restoration efforts, identification of elevation thresholds using SACS products and tools, using the measures in cost library to identify planning level cost estimates for suitable measures, evaluation of compound flooding residual risk in the territories of Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the evaluation of tidal control structures managed by the South Florida Water Management District. Additional steps include coordination with stakeholders to ensure that the technical analyses align with the local goals and objectives of the stakeholders within each focus area. Now I'll pass it over to the Mobile District for their update. Thanks.
Alrighty, thanks Kip, I appreciate it. Good afternoon everyone. Ginny, if you'd move to the next slide. All right, so I'm Meredith Ladart. I serve as the project manager for the SACS portion of the Mobile District AOR. We are responsible for the Alabama and Mississippi state appendices, as well as providing support to Kip and Ashley for the Florida State Appendix for the Panhandle region. So since we've last spoken, we have had our kickoff webinars as well as our strategy development workshops. We have 5 focus areas within the Mobile District area of responsibility, including 2 in the Florida Panhandle, 1 in Alabama, and 2 in Mississippi. So we had 4 workshops across the 5 focus areas, with the 2 Mississippi focus area workshops combined into 1, as they share many of the same stakeholders. So what did we learn? Some of the key general themes that we had were build on the resiliency work that's going on within each of the focus areas. There are many things that have already been occurring, and so one of the main goals of SACS is to not reinvent the wheel, but identify where those gaps are and what actions and how we can fill those throughout the coming years as part of a long-term legacy plan. RSM is important. One of the polls that we asked during our focus area workshops was how many of our stakeholders were aware of regional sediment management or have participated in a regional sediment management project and or study. And so most of our stakeholders were very much aware of that, which was fantastic, as well as we identified a couple of issues and are having some follow-on conversations within the core, as well as with those additional stakeholders, on how we can improve potential material placement with some of our existing projects. But one of the other key themes was leveraging watershed management plans that are in the process of being updated or being created. So some of the follow-on conversations that we've had with stakeholders from the focus areas are with particularly the National Estuary programs and several of the focus areas, and where we can help support some of those actions either already identified within the focus areas, or provide technical analyses and support for development of additional watershed management plans. So where are we headed? We are continuing to have follow-up, a lot of one-on-one conversations with stakeholders post our Webinar 2 strategy development workshops. We are going to be having our wrap-up and follow-on workshops starting in mid-November through early December for our 5 focus areas, and then working on what additional analyses are needed and what potential work we can go ahead and really identify as some interim recommendations and get started on that the core could participate in prior to actually getting all the way to the final report. Next slide, please. So just a couple highlights from some of the additional technical work. Back in the Webinar 2, we were able to show some of the outputs of the HAZUS results that were within our AOR. And Christina had mentioned they had the environmental workshop. So this is just a couple highlights from the priority environmental area and the environmental analysis that our team has been spending quite a bit of time on over the last couple of months. Within Mississippi, we identified 9 priority environmental areas. Those happen to all occur within our 2 focus areas in Mississippi. And then over in Alabama, we had identified 10 priority environmental areas, 5 of which are within our focus area and 5 of which are not. Kind of key commonalities between priority environmental areas: they tend to have highly vulnerable to sea level rise and increasing coastal storms. A lot of them have national designations in terms of their significance, as well as support a number of species and a diversity of habitats. Next slide. All right, so within the Florida Panhandle, we also have 16 priority environmental areas, and similar to the methodology we use for both in Mississippi and Alabama, these also support critical habitat for key species, as well can contain the Gulf Islands National Seashore and other important habitats in sensitive areas that were identified either through the state or also at a national level. Next slide. So this is a sample of one of the priority environmental areas within the Florida Panhandle. This level of detail will be provided when the draft appendix is available for review, but this really just kind of gives a highlight of some of the details, facts, things we learned for each of those priority environmental areas and why we felt that they really need to be highlighted, and also a focus for potential actions to mitigate some of that future risk. So this here is Apalachicola Bay. One of the things that's really important, I think, about Apalachicola is that it does have a direct economic driver, as well as being a sensitive environmental area, as it supports oyster and fish processing and things like that. So with that, we look forward to continuing to meet with you and work as we can refine our strategies and build upon those, and build new relationships with some of our stakeholders who we don't know as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pam.
All right, thank you, Meredith. I'd really like to thank all of our regional command center team members, as well as our district project managers and planners for those great updates. It's really clear. I hope we've communicated this to you all, that we've got a lot going on, and in your participation in these activities have been key to the successes that we as a team have achieved to date. Now, up next, we're going to be moving through the final focus area action strategy workshops that you heard about, which are set to be complete towards the end of November. The draft focus area action strategies themselves, preliminary drafts, are really slated for submittal in December. Although these are going to be summarized in the main report, and of course they're going to be included in the draft report for continued follow-on and review late next year, in and around October. The environmental technical report will be wrapped up in November, and it will be posted on our web page once it completes some internal reviews. The coastal hazard system product that Drew Condon talked about a little bit, we did answer a question regarding that schedule. That will be publicly available. That product will be publicly available for the territories in the Feb-March timeframe of 2021, next year, not so far away actually. On the South Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico products will be externally published in and around the June-July 2021 timeframe. So again, our draft report will be out on the street for review in October. That's a big milestone for us, and we do have a lot of work to do between now and then. Next slide, please. So as we did mention earlier, our intent is to host these updates for you every few months, or generally once a quarter. With 42 out of 63 focus area action strategy workshops that have taken up a lot of time, meeting time, stakeholder partner time over the last few months, it really wound up pushing this quarterly update, which really should have occurred in September, into October. So what that does is then push our final update to you all in the calendar year 2020 out into December, which is really just 8 weeks away. So 8 weeks away is really another way of saying right around the corner. We'd like to propose altering the format of this December workshop from an overall study update to maybe a more focused dive into a topic or product of particular interest to you. Since it's pretty challenging to go into much detail on any one part of our study program when we're briefing the entire study and all of the activities that are concurrently going on, we thought this next update in December might provide us with a great opportunity to just get into a little bit more detail on one or more specific topics or products that you would like to hear about. So if you've got a particular interest in a technical product or topic that the SACS is working with, please let us know through the chat function, or send us an email, send me an email, send the SACS email box a message, and we'll use that to kind of scope out the contents of the December quarterly update for you. So on behalf of our team, again, I want to thank you very much for your interest and your participation and hanging with us today. We do have some time available for question and answers. I do know that we've got some queued up in the chat function, so I'm going to turn the mic over to Jenny to facilitate that Q&A. Jenny?
Great, thanks, Pam. And thank you for those submitting kind of your ideas for the next webinar into the chat. As those come in, maybe after we tackle some questions, we can read out a few in case that spurs other ideas. I know one of the initial questions that we first got just had to do with stakeholder engagement. It was a person who, this is their first time kind of attending one of these quarterly webinars, and they just felt like people in their community maybe weren't as keyed in to the overall SACS effort and what it could do for them, and were worried that maybe a lot of the outreach is focused towards government officials, but wondering what kind of communication strategy there was towards the general public.
Lisa, would you like to take that question as our outreach lead?
Sure. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much for that question, and it's a very good question. We will work with, we have several county officials that are on in our stakeholder database, and we will definitely work with the project managers throughout the study area to make sure that we are communicating with them. We also would encourage anyone who is interested in participating in these to please drop it to us in the chat, and we will make sure that we reach out to the specific area that you're interested in of the study or throughout the study, because we will rely on our stakeholders to reach down to public levels as well. And public review of the draft report will occur, and we'll need all stakeholders to help engage at their relevant local level. So please do drop us a note in the chat, and as I said, you can always reach out to the SACS email. I can provide you with copies of our newsletters, and then I can also put you in contact with your specific project manager that is in the area of interest that you have. So again, we encourage you to do that because we want to be as open as possible, and appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. I know we did have some other questions and comments come in kind of specific to some of those focus area action strategy wrap-up workshops coming up. And so people were asking, how they could be included if they had a specific area of interest. And I assume your answer will kind of be similar, to reach out to you or those district managers to make sure they are tied into kind of upgoing efforts. Is that correct?
Yes, that is exactly right. So if you just want to drop it in the chat, or again, you can send an email, and I will make sure that you are connected with that project manager. We have the schedule laid out. We don't have exact timing, but we're working on that simultaneous with this quarterly webinar. So those times and days will be available, and they are virtual. So again, we will highly encourage you to just go ahead and shoot an email or drop it in the chat. We'll make sure we work that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I just kind of want to support that, and also encourage folks. Also, the contact information for the project managers that are working the state and territory appendices is included in this briefing. Please feel free to reach directly out to those project managers. The focus area action strategy workshops, the invites for those workshops are pretty much focused on stakeholders, which include individuals that are located within those focus areas. However, I know for a fact that many of our project managers are taking contacts from folks reaching out saying, hey, I'm not in a focus area, but I'd still like to be involved. I'd still like to know what's going on. Are there any other meetings for me? And our project managers are happy and willing to directly engage and make sure that if you're in that situation, that you're able to be plugged in to some of the communications that are ongoing in your particular state or territory. So Lisa is available. Also, please reach out to the project manager. If you've got a comment like that in the chat, we'll also use that to ensure that you get a follow-up.
Great, thank you. Let's see, we did have a question just asking for a little bit more about those upcoming military workshops. Pam, are you the best to maybe speak a little bit further on those?
Sure. I'd be happy. I know April had mentioned that. We are planning, we're in the preparation stage at this point of having a regional workshop. It'll just be one workshop, but a regional workshop to engage our military stakeholders and customers. So the South Atlantic Coastal Study is not scoped to go into a great amount of detail relative to risk assessment recommendations on our military facilities. There's a number of reasons for that. Security concerns are amongst the top reasons. Also, many of those installations are already engaged in very detailed site-specific risk reduction and resiliency efforts. Also, of course, the infrastructure database is not publicly available, and we're constrained certainly as to what type of information we could publish relative to our military facilities. But our military partners and stakeholders are very important key partners to us, and our plan is to hold one regional workshop to engage the installations that are located within the South Atlantic Coastal Study footprint. And I believe there's about 89 of those. We're currently in the process of identifying the right points of contact in those installations, and the primary purpose for that workshop is going to be to ensure that our military partners are aware of how the SACS is supporting their efforts, the technical products that our study team is developing, and how those study products can enhance the installation's site-specific efforts on risk reduction and resiliency, and also just kind of hear from our customers in terms of the type of information that they could use or that they need, as well as maybe identifying some follow-on partnering opportunities between the installations and maybe surrounding communities, for example, in the realm of regional sediment management opportunities or such. So we're looking to try to host that workshop in December. December is an awfully tough month. That's what we're going to try to do. Again, that'll be one workshop. It'll be a regional workshop, and we're right now just in the stages of making sure we're getting ready to contact the right folks on those installations to set that up.
Great. Thank you, Pam. I thought I'd go ahead and read out just a few of the ideas for the upcoming workshops in case that spurs some discussion or additional comments. One person said they're very interested in hearing about advancements in the flood modeling and product availability. Someone else said how to use some of the online tools may be a useful topic for the next webinar, doing kind of a walkthrough of some of those tools. Another said possibly the importance of best practices concerning dune plantings, new nourishment technologies, and best practices. Let me scroll through a little bit more. A look at the economic risk assessment tool functionality, again, test cases, looking at maybe rural versus urban. And it sounds like maybe another kind of walkthrough there. If there's anything else. One on best emerging practices and effective collaboration and data sharing used across disciplines, jurisdictions over time, plan and program alignment, and use of performance measures. So it looks like we're getting some good ideas there. I know there's kind of some specific questions coming in terms of just specific people to follow up on or contacts. All of kind of the questions in chat being submitted today will distribute to the full kind of SACS team, and we can answer some of those kind of very specific questions following the workshop. Let me just scroll through. I know there's also been kind of a lot of requests if we can send out, links. I know some of the links have been in these slides, and this will be made available on the SACS website, but there was a request to kind of maybe send out an email or something just with those links accessible after the webinar. Lisa, I don't know if you think that's feasible.
I think we could probably accommodate that, certainly. And I do see, Jenny, that there are some comments. We do have a question or comment from someone regarding Florida and being included or being made aware of the upcoming meetings in Florida. We'll certainly make sure that goes to Ashley Fountain. And Lisa, if you would work with Ashley on that, we'll make sure that we get that addressed for sure. As well, Jenny, as you mentioned, as some of the questions for contact information in New Bern, that we will ask Lisa Bishop to fold back with you with that information. So we'll make sure we get back to you on that. Are there any questions, Jenny, general questions that our command center team or district project managers from a technical standpoint can address in the remaining time that we have?
Lindsay, let me know if you see anything I've missed that would be good to point to the team. I know, again, there's just a question about would the video be available after the webinar, and that's another case where it will be posted online.
Okay.
Correct. And then I just also want to point out, I don't know if everybody can see in the little panel window, you can go under handouts, and there's a PDF copy of these slides which shows the focus areas or the area of the study and all of the project managers and their points of contact. So please feel free to go ahead and download that onto your computer so that you will have that at your fingertips right now. And if you are interested in a specific area, then you can go ahead and reach out to them just as soon as possible. So the handouts are available. Just hit that arrow and drop down, and there's a PDF copy there. Thank you.
Thanks. There is
Jenny,
one more general question.
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Yep, there was one that kind of related to kind of involvement with social justice organizations and the implications of the study to improve or worsen current socioeconomic inequities. I don't know if anyone wants to touch on how the SACS is kind of addressing some of those issues.
Trevor, do you want to talk a little bit about what's in the Tier 1 relative to social vulnerability?
Sure. Yeah, we are using the CDC's published Social Vulnerability Index as one of our exposure indices in the Tier 1. It's 10% of our composite exposure index, and we're looking at it across a variety of themes that they identify, from income level to populations with a disability. There's about 14 or 15 themes that we kind of touched on and aggregated to have kind of a general picture of social vulnerability in one of our exposure indices. So that is something we have considered, at least at that regional scale, for analysis moving forward as it relates to flooding risk.
So I'm also going to tack on to that and say that if there are, relative to the Tier 2 analysis that our districts are engaged in, if you know of specific data sets or have some specific questions in terms of particular areas, please reach out to those project managers and engage with them, because we want to hear about that. We want to ensure that all of that is considered as part of the Tier 2 analysis. And should those areas impact the designated focus areas, that should also be reflected in those focus areas as well. So I really appreciate that question, because it's a very important key index for us in terms of overall risk. And we do want to make sure that we're adequately and accurately reflecting that in our outputs. I know there was a question, Jenny, on I believe it was focused on Florida, Gulf Islands, National Seashores mentioned, but are there other lands, specifically Everglades and Biscayne National Park, included in SACS? Kip, do you want to talk a little bit about that specifically in the SACS study area in Florida?
Sure. Yeah, the Biscayne Bay and Everglades National Park, those are two of the priority environmental areas that will be within the Florida appendix. So we will be discussing those and identifying those as some of the priority environmental areas to keep an eye on.
And just to kind of tack on to that, just as a reminder, the South Atlantic Coastal Study Area encompasses the tidally influenced portions of our coastal areas. So to the extent that all or a portion of some of those lands are within that tidally influenced area, that is the portion that we would essentially be focusing on in this particular study program.
Okay.
Anything else, Jenny, that you think we can handle? I know we're kind of getting to the end of our time here.
Yeah, I think we've covered all the big picture ideas. Like I said, there's quite a few kind of very specific questions we can follow up on. What's kind of the best contact offline? But unless I see something else pop in, or if somebody else, one of our panelists, saw something that they want to make sure they respond to on the open line right now, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, hey Jenny, it's Lisa again, and Ashley is on the phone and trying to unmute because she just wanted to address a few of the questions. She has been made a panelist, if you can help out.
All right, thank you. And Kip answered that question about Everglades and Biscayne Bay, and thanks for chiming in, Pam, about the tidally influenced areas. So the Biscayne Bay is actually part of one of our focus areas. And so we anticipate some additional discussion there and documentation within our focus area action strategy. So just wanted to point that out, but appreciate hearing these.
Thanks, Ashley. Ashley, could you also maybe just provide a quick response to the question on whether the South Atlantic Coastal Study overlaps with Miami-Dade Back Bay study in Jacksonville?
Oh, sure. We have been coordinating with the Miami-Dade Back Bay study teams, and okay, I see the question coming in now. And so we do have kind of an overlap of our study areas, and so the SAC study area does overlap with the Miami-Dade Back Bay study area, and that's why we've been coordinating. And I think maybe we have mentioned this on the call before, but Kip did point it out that one of our highest risk areas in Florida is actually in Southeast Florida, and it's being addressed by the Miami-Dade Back Bay study team. So I hope that answers your question there. We are working together with the other study teams and the ongoing efforts within the focus area and study area in Florida.
Thanks, Ashley. And Jenny, I just want to real quickly answer the question that came in regarding whether Surpass is, whether we're also working with Surpass regarding the setting up of the installation workshop. And I can say yes, we have been in touch with Addie Thornton. And so Surpass will be assisting us to make sure we're contacting the right folks, and they will also be attending that as well.
Great, thanks for circling back on those questions. I haven't seen anything else come in. I'll go ahead and move forward to kind of our last slide.
All right, so again, this is our wrap up and our thank you. It's been an hour and a half. I hope you found this quarterly update informative. Again, there's been a lot that's been going on. It's a little hard to get our arms all around it. So we appreciate your time and your attention. And your assistance with helping us kind of tailor our next workshop. So these are our contacts. Please feel free to shoot any of us an email at any point in time for follow-ups. And as Jenny mentioned, we will divvy up the remaining questions and make sure that we get responses back to you. The right folks reach back out to you. So from my standpoint, from representing South Atlantic Coastal Study regional and district teams, thank you very much for participating this afternoon. All right, thank you.
Thanks. Well, we'll hold the line just for a second and make sure we download all the chats and questions, and then we'll go ahead and close out the webinar. I appreciate everyone joining today.
Thank you so much.
Lindsay, I know I just downloaded all the logs. I assume once you have two, just for backup, feel free to go ahead and close out.
All right, great. Thanks, Jenny.